The emergency room doors of Massachusetts General Hospital burst open on a cold November evening, bringing with them the chaos of a multi-car pileup on the Mass Pike. Dr. Sarah Mitchell looked up from her charts, her trained eyes immediately assessing the incoming patients. After 12 years in cardiothoracic surgery, she'd learned to compartmentalize emotions, to see patients as puzzles to solve rather than lives hanging in the balance. "Dr. Mitchell, we need you in trauma too," called out Nurse Peterson, her voice cutting through the organized chaos. Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, her white coat flowing behind her as she navigated the crowded hallway. The fluorescent lights overhead cast everything in stark relief, the smell of antiseptic and urgency filling the air. Outside, through the small windows, she could see the Boston skyline beginning to twinkle as evening settled over the city. The patient in Trauma 2 was conscious, which was always a good sign. Sarah's eyes fell on a woman in her early 30s, dark hair matted with blood from a laceration on her forehead, but those eyes, honey brown and somehow still alert, despite the obvious pain, locked onto Sarah's with an intensity that made her pause mid-step. "Hi there, I'm Dr. Mitchell," Sarah said, slipping into her professional demeanor as she approached the gurney. "Can you tell me your name?" "Emma," the woman replied, her voice slightly hoarse. "Emma Torres." Sarah began her examination, checking vitals, assessing the extent of injuries. Broken ribs, possible internal bleeding, the head laceration. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but Emma would need to stay for observation. Yet as Sarah worked, she couldn't shake the feeling of those eyes following her every movement. "You're going to be fine, Ms. Torres," Sarah assured her, making notations on the tablet. "We'll get you cleaned up and run some tests. You were very lucky tonight." "Lucky," Emma repeated, a slight smile playing at her lips despite the pain. "That's one way to put it." If you're enjoying this story of unexpected connections and self-discovery, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We share stories of love that defy expectations, and your support means the world to us. 3 days later, Sarah found herself assigned to Emma's case for follow-up care. Dr. Reeves, the attending physician, had a family emergency and asked Sarah to cover his rounds. It was unusual for a cardiothoracic surgeon to do general follow-ups, but the hospital was short-staffed, and Sarah didn't mind the change of pace. She knocked gently on the door of room 412 before entering. Emma was sitting up in bed, looking considerably better than she had in the ER. Her dark hair was clean now, pulled back in a loose braid, and the butterfly bandages on her forehead were stark white against her olive skin. "Dr. Mitchell," Emma greeted her, and Sarah noticed how Emma's whole face seemed to light up. "I was hoping I'd see you again. How are you feeling today?" Sarah asked, maintaining her professional distance as she checked the monitors beside the bed. "Better. Much better." Emma paused, then added, "The nurses told me you saved my life that night. That if you hadn't caught the internal bleeding when you did." "I was just doing my job," Sarah replied, though she felt an unusual warmth at the compliment. "Your test results look good. We'll probably discharge you tomorrow if everything continues to improve." "That's great news," Emma said, though her tone suggested mixed feelings. "I suppose I should be eager to get out of here. But honestly, the peace and quiet has been nice. No work emails, no deadlines, no expectations." Sarah found herself curious. "What do you do, Ms. Torres?" "Please, call me Emma, and I'm a photographer. Freelance mostly, though I have a contract with the Boston Globe for human interest pieces." Emma gestured to the small table beside her bed where a battered Nikon camera sat. "That survived the crash better than I did." "Photography," Sarah mused, glancing at the camera. "That must be rewarding work." "It can be," Emma said. And there was that look again, intense, searching, as if she could see something in Sarah that Sarah couldn't see in herself. "I like capturing moments of truth. People being authentically themselves, even if just for a second." Sarah felt suddenly exposed under that gaze. She cleared her throat, looking back down at her tablet. "Well, I should let you rest. I'll check in tomorrow morning before your discharge." "Dr. Mitchell?" Emma called as Sarah reached the door. Sarah turned back. "Yes?" "Thank you. Really, not just for the medical care, but for..." Emma seemed to search for words. "For seeing me, if that makes sense." It didn't make sense. Not really. but Sarah found herself nodding anyway. Rest well, Emma. That evening, Sarah returned to her home in Brookline, a beautiful brownstone she and her husband David had purchased 5 years ago. David was already home, loosening his tie as he poured himself a scotch in their modern kitchen. "Hey, honey," he greeted absently, his attention on his phone. "How was your day?" "Busy," Sarah replied, setting her bag down and moving to the refrigerator. There was a pileup on the Mass Pike. Long day in the ER. David responded, not really listening. He was a corporate attorney at one of Boston's most prestigious firms, and more often than not, his mind was still at the office even when his body was home. "I have to fly to New York tomorrow for a deposition. Probably be gone until Friday." Sarah nodded. Used to his frequent trips, she pulled out ingredients for a salad, not particularly hungry but knowing she should eat something. Their marriage had settled into a comfortable routine over 8 years. Predictable, stable, safe. They had dinner parties with other successful couples, took yearly vacations to resorts in the Caribbean, and maintained a pleasant, if somewhat distant, relationship. "There's a charity gala on Saturday," David continued, scrolling through his emails. "The firm is a sponsor. We need to make an appearance." "I'll find a dress," Sarah agreed, though the thought of making small talk with David's colleagues filled her with a vague sense of exhaustion. Later, as she lay in bed beside her already sleeping husband, Sarah found her thoughts drifting back to the hospital, to a pair of honey-brown eyes that seemed to see too much. She told herself it was just the intensity of the emergency, the adrenaline of saving a life. But somewhere deep down, in a place she'd never examined too closely, she knew it was something more. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the hospital earlier than necessary. She told herself it was to catch up on paperwork, but found her steps leading to the 4th floor, to room 412. Emma was awake, sitting by the window and watching the sun rise over Boston Harbor. The golden light caught in her dark hair, and for a moment, Sarah just stood in the doorway, struck by something she couldn't name. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Emma said without turning around. "I've been in Boston for 3 years, and I never get tired of these sunrises." "You're not from here originally?" Sarah asked, entering the room. "California. Los Angeles, to be specific." Emma turned to face her, and Sarah was surprised to see the photographer was dressed in street clothes, jeans and a soft gray sweater. But Boston felt like home the moment I arrived. Something about the history here, the way the old and new coexist. Sarah began her examination, checking Emma's vitals one last time. Everything looked good. Emma would be cleared for discharge within the hour. "You're healing beautifully," Sarah said. "Just take it easy for the next few weeks. No strenuous activity, and if you experience any dizziness or unusual pain, come back immediately, I know." Emma finished with a smile. "Dr. Mitchell, can I ask you something?" Sarah looked up from her tablet, suddenly wary. "Of course. Why did you become a doctor?" The question caught Sarah off guard. Most people asked what kind of doctor she was, or made comments about how demanding the work must be. No one had asked her why in years, maybe not since medical school. "I wanted to help people," Sarah answered, the stock response coming easily. "To make a difference." Emma tilted her head, studying her with that unnerving intensity. "That's what you're supposed to say, but why really?" Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a small crack in the careful walls she'd built. "My younger brother had a congenital heart defect. He died when I was 16, and I was helpless to do anything. I suppose I've been trying to save him ever since." The words surprised Sarah as much as they seemed to resonate with Emma. She hadn't talked about Michael in years, had learned to keep that grief locked away in a box labeled the past. "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "That must have been incredibly painful." "It was a long time ago," Sarah replied, her professional mask sliding back into place. But her hands, she noticed, were trembling slightly as she made her final notes. Emma stood, moving closer to Sarah. "Dr. Mitchell, Sarah, if I may, can I give you something?" Before Sarah could respond, Emma reached for her camera and pulled out a photograph from a small compartment in the bag. It was a picture of Boston Common at dawn, the trees bare but beautiful, the morning light painting everything in shades of gold and pink. 2 women walked along the path, their heads bent close together, laughing. "I took this last spring," Emma explained. I was there photographing for a piece about urban green spaces, but I couldn't help capturing this moment. Look at their faces. That's joy. Pure, unfiltered joy. That's what I'm always looking for in my work. Those moments when people forget to pretend. Sarah stared at the photograph, feeling something stir inside her. Longing, perhaps, though for what, she couldn't say. I want you to have it, Emma said. As a thank you. You gave me my life back. This is just a picture, but maybe it will remind you that there's beauty even in ordinary moments. I can't accept this, Sarah protested weakly. It's your work. Please. Emma's hand covered Sarah's, pressing the photograph into her palm. I want you to have it. The touch lasted only a second, but Sarah felt it like electricity, like something fundamental had just shifted in the universe. She looked up, meeting Emma's eyes, and saw understanding there, and something else, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Thank you, Sarah managed, her voice barely a whisper. We're just getting started with Sarah and Emma's journey. If you want to see where this story goes, hit that subscribe button and join our community of love story enthusiasts. 2 weeks passed, and Sarah tried to convince herself that she'd forgotten about Emma Torres. She threw herself into her work, performing 3 complex surgeries in as many days. She attended the charity gala with David, wearing a burgundy dress that cost more than some people's monthly rent, and smiled at all the right people. But the photograph sat on her desk at the hospital, tucked between a stack of medical journals where she could see it when she thought no one was looking. And late at night, when David was asleep beside her or away on another business trip, Sarah would find herself thinking about those honey-brown eyes, about the way Emma had said, "Don't look at me like that," as if she'd seen something in Sarah that even Sarah didn't know existed. It was a rainy December afternoon when Emma walked back into Sarah's life. Sarah was in the hospital cafeteria, picking at a salad and reviewing surgical notes, when a voice interrupted her concentration. Dr. Mitchell? Sarah looked up, and there was Emma, holding a coffee and looking slightly uncertain. She wore dark jeans, boots, and a leather jacket over a cream sweater. Her hair was down now, falling in waves past her shoulders, and the scar on her forehead had healed to a thin pink line. Emma, Sarah said, surprised by how much her heart rate had accelerated. What are you doing here? I have a follow-up appointment with Dr. Reeves, Emma explained, gesturing toward the elevators. I was early, so I thought I'd grab a coffee. May I sit? Sarah nodded, moving her papers aside. Emma slid into the seat across from her, and Sarah was acutely aware of every movement, every detail, the silver rings on Emma's fingers, the faint scent of jasmine perfume, the way her eyes still held that same intensity. How are you feeling? Sarah asked, falling back on professional concern. Completely healed according to my x-rays. Dr. Reeves says I'm remarkably resilient. Emma smiled. I've been back at work for a week now. Actually, I have an assignment this weekend that I'm really excited about. What's the assignment? There's a community art project in Dorchester. Local residents creating murals about hope and resilience. The Globe wants a photo essay. It's exactly the kind of work I love. Real people, real stories, authentic emotions. Sarah found herself genuinely interested. That sounds meaningful. It is. Emma paused, seeming to consider something. Then, with the same directness Sarah was coming to associate with her, she asked, Sarah, would you like to come with me? To the project, I mean. This Saturday. Oh, Sarah started, ready with an excuse. She had plans with David, or work, or something. But the truth was, she didn't have plans. David would be golfing with clients, as he did most Saturdays, and Sarah would be home alone, reading medical journals or half-watching television. Just as company, Emma added quickly. I promise I'm not trying to be inappropriate. I just thought you might enjoy it. You seem like someone who could use a reminder that the world is bigger than hospital walls. Sarah should have said no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming to say no. But instead, she heard herself say, What time? Saturday arrived with crisp December air and clear skies. Sarah had told David she was meeting a colleague. Not exactly a lie, she reasoned, though the guilt sat heavy in her stomach. She met Emma in Dorchester, outside a community center covered in scaffolding. Emma's face lit up when she saw Sarah approaching. "You came. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Sarah admitted honestly. "But you did." Emma smiled, slinging her camera bag over her shoulder. "Come on, let me introduce you to some incredible people." The next 4 hours passed in what felt like minutes. Sarah watched Emma work, marveling at how she put people at ease, how she could capture not just images, but emotions. A grandmother painting flowers to honor her late husband, teenagers spelling out dreams in vibrant colors, a young mother with her daughter, both laughing as they added handprints to a collective mural. Emma introduced Sarah as her friend. The word made Sarah's heart skip in a way she didn't want to examine. And soon Sarah found herself talking with the community members, hearing their stories, even picking up a paintbrush to add a small blue bird to one corner of a mural. "A bird?" Emma asked, appearing beside her with a grin. "They symbolize freedom," Sarah said, then felt foolish. When had she become someone who thought about symbolism? "I love it," Emma said softly, and clicked her camera. Sarah turned, realizing Emma had just photographed her. "Hey, I'm not the subject here." "You are today." Emma's smile was gentle. "You looked so peaceful just then, Sarah, like you'd forgotten to carry the world on your shoulders for a moment." They grabbed coffee afterward at a small cafe nearby, sitting in a corner booth as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. Sarah wrapped her hands around her mug, feeling more relaxed than she had in months, maybe years. "Thank you for today," Sarah said. "I needed this more than I realized." "When's the last time you did something just for yourself?" Emma asked. "Not for work, not for obligation, just because it made you happy?" Sarah couldn't remember. "It's been a while." "That's what I thought." Emma leaned forward, her expression serious. "Sarah, can I be honest with you about something?" Sarah's pulse quickened. "Of course." "When I woke up in that hospital room and saw you, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time. A connection. And I know you felt it too. Don't shake your head. I saw it in your eyes." Emma took a breath. "I'm not trying to complicate your life. I know you're married, and I respect that. But I also think you're living half a life, and that breaks my heart." "You don't know anything about my life," Sarah said, but the words lacked conviction. "Don't I?" Emma's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "You're brilliant, successful, probably at the top of your field. But you look exhausted, Sarah. Not physically, emotionally, like you've been pretending for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be real." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, which was ridiculous. She was a surgeon, controlled and composed. She didn't cry in coffee shops because a near stranger spoke uncomfortable truths. "I should go," Sarah said, gathering her coat. "Wait." Emma reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Sarah's hand. "I'm sorry. I pushed too hard. I do that sometimes. My ex-girlfriend used to say I had no sense of boundaries." Sarah froze. "Your ex-girlfriend?" Emma nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Yes. I'm gay, Sarah. I thought you knew. I thought that's why you looked so scared every time we're in the same room." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Sarah felt the walls of her carefully constructed life beginning to crack, and she wasn't sure if she was terrified or relieved. "I'm not," Sarah started, then stopped. "I'm married to David. I'm not gay." "Okay," Emma said simply. "Then I apologize for overstepping. I misread the situation." But as Sarah drove home that evening, her hands shaking on the steering wheel, she couldn't shake the feeling that Emma hadn't misread anything at all. That maybe, just maybe, Emma had seen something in Sarah that Sarah had spent her entire life running from. This story is about more than romance. It's about the courage to face our truths. If you're finding yourself drawn into Sarah's journey of self-discovery, subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate authentic love in all its forms. The weeks leading up to Christmas were a blur of holiday obligations and growing anxiety. Sarah found herself thinking about Emma constantly. During surgeries, at dinner parties, lying awake at night while David slept soundly beside her. She'd memorized every detail of that afternoon in Dorchester, replaying conversations, analyzing every word, every glance. She was 45 minutes into a complex valve replacement when it hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had a crush. At 35 years old, married for 8 years, she had a crush on a woman she barely knew. Doctor. Mitchell? Are you okay? The surgical resident's voice cut through her panic. Sarah blinked, refocusing on the open chest cavity before her. Fine. Let's continue. She finished the surgery flawlessly. Her hands never betrayed her, even when her mind was in chaos. But afterward, in her office with the door closed, Sarah let herself feel the full weight of her confusion. She pulled out her phone, stared at Emma's number. Emma had insisted on exchanging numbers, in case of medical questions, and typed out a message. I can't stop thinking about what you said. She deleted it, typed again. Can we talk? Deleted. Finally, she just sent, coffee? Emma's response came within minutes. When? Tomorrow. 2 p.m. Same place? I'll be there. Emma was already at the cafe when Sarah arrived, sitting in the same corner booth. She'd brought her camera, and Sarah wondered if she ever went anywhere without it. Hi, Emma said softly as Sarah slid into the seat across from her. Hi. Sarah ordered a cappuccino from the waitress, then sat in silence until it arrived, trying to find the words for feelings she didn't fully understand. You wanted to talk, Emma prompted gently. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, Sarah blurted out, then immediately felt her face flush. I don't know what's happening to me. I've always been attracted to men. Emma waited, letting Sarah stumble through her confession. David is a good man. He's successful, stable, reliable. We have a good life together. We have plans. We've been talking about starting a family, maybe next year. Sarah's hands twisted together on the table. This doesn't make sense. You don't make sense. Love rarely does, Emma said quietly. I didn't say anything about love. Didn't you? Emma's smile was sad. Sarah, I've been where you are. Not exactly the same. I figured out I was gay in college, came out to my family when I was 22. But I understand the fear, the confusion, the feeling that your whole world is tilting on its axis. How do you live with it? Sarah asked desperately. How do you just accept something that goes against everything you thought you knew about yourself? One day at a time. One moment of honesty at a time. Emma finally did reach across the table then, covering Sarah's hand with her own. But Sarah, you need to understand something. I can't be your experiment. I can't be the person you use to figure yourself out and then walk away from. I've been there before, and it nearly destroyed me. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, at the way Emma's fingers were slightly calloused from her camera work, at the silver rings that caught the light. She should pull away. She should leave this cafe, block Emma's number, and never see her again. Instead, she turned her hand over, lacing their fingers together. I don't know what I'm doing, Sarah whispered. I'm terrified. I know, Emma replied, but you're here. That takes courage. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, neither speaking. Outside, Boston went about its business, cars honking, people hurrying past with shopping bags, the city preparing for the holidays. But in their corner booth, time seemed suspended. Finally, Sarah pulled her hand away. I need time. To think. To figure this out. Take all the time you need, Emma said. I'm not going anywhere. But as Sarah walked to her car, she felt the tears she'd been holding back finally fall. Because she was married. Because she'd built a life based on expectations and shoulds. Because at 35, she was discovering that maybe she'd never really known herself at all. Christmas dinner at David's parents' house in Newton was exactly as excruciating as Sarah had anticipated. His mother, Patricia, spent the entire meal dropping hints about grandchildren, while David's father talked about the stock market and his golf handicap. David himself was distracted, checking his phone constantly, something about a merger that was happening after the holidays. Sarah smiled and nodded in all the right places, passed dishes and complimented the turkey. But inside, she felt like she was watching herself from outside her body. This woman in the burgundy sweater dress and pearl necklace. Was this really her? Had it ever been? Sarah, dear, you seem distracted. Patricia observed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Is everything all right? Just tired from work. Sarah replied automatically. We've been understaffed this month. You work too hard, Patricia said, though her tone suggested this was a criticism rather than concern. David needs a wife who's present, especially when you start having children. David looked up from his phone. Mom, we've talked about this. Sarah's career is important. Of course it is. Patricia agreed with a tight smile. But there are priorities in a marriage. Sarah excused herself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone. She locked the door and leaned against the sink, staring at her reflection. Who was this woman looking back at her? When had she become someone who lived for other people's expectations? Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Merry Christmas, Sarah. I hope you're finding moments of joy today. Attached was a photograph, Emma's cat, a gray tabby, tangled in Christmas ribbon. Sarah found herself smiling genuinely for the first time all day. She typed back, Thank you. Your cat is adorable. His name is Kerouac. He's terrible at respecting boundaries, but I love him anyway. Sarah could hear the gentle humor in Emma's words, could imagine her smile as she typed them. She wanted to be wherever Emma was, wanted to be free of this obligation, this pretense, this life that suddenly felt like a costume she'd been wearing for too long. Sarah? David's knock on the door. You okay in there? Fine, she called back, quickly deleting the text thread and splashing cold water on her face. Be right out. When she emerged, she found David waiting in the hallway, actually looking at her for once instead of at his phone. Hey, he said softly. I know this is a lot. My mother can be intense. It's fine, Sarah said automatically. Is it? David studied her face. You've seemed distant lately. More than usual, I mean. Is everything okay with us? This was her moment. She could tell him the truth, start the conversation that would unravel their entire life together. But standing in his parents' hallway, with Christmas music playing downstairs and the smell of coffee and pie wafting up, Sarah couldn't find the words. I'm just tired, she repeated. Long hours at the hospital. David nodded, accepting this explanation as he'd accepted countless others over the years. After the holidays, let's take a weekend away, just us. Maybe Vermont? We could go skiing like we used to. That sounds nice, Sarah lied, and followed him back downstairs. New Year's Eve found Sarah alone. David was in New York again, something about closing the merger before the end of the fiscal year. He'd invited her to join him, but Sarah had declined, claiming she had to work. Instead, she sat in their living room as midnight approached, a glass of wine in her hand, watching the celebrations on TV. Her phone rang at 11:47. Emma. Sarah stared at the screen, her heart racing. She shouldn't answer. Nothing good could come from this conversation. But her finger was already pressing accept. Hello? Hi, Emma said, and Sarah could hear music and laughter in the background. Sorry, I know I shouldn't call. I'm at a friend's party, and I've had just enough champagne to lose my good judgment. I wanted to hear your voice. Emma. I miss you, Emma continued, her words slightly rushed. Is that crazy? We barely know each other, and I miss you. I miss talking to you. I miss the way you look when you forget to be guarded. I miss... She stopped. I'm sorry. I'm going to hang up now before I make this worse. Don't, Sarah said quickly. Don't hang up. Silence on the line, except for the distant sounds of celebration. Where's your husband? Emma asked finally. New York. And you're alone on New Year's Eve. By choice, Sarah said, though she wasn't sure that was entirely true. Sarah, what are we doing here? Emma's voice was soft, vulnerable in a way Sarah had rarely heard. Because I need to know if I should let you go. If this is just a moment of confusion for you. If you're going to go back to your life and forget about me, I need to know now. Before I fall any further. I don't know. Sarah admitted, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what I'm doing, or what I want, or who I even am anymore. All I know is that when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe. Like I've been suffocating my entire life and never realized it until you showed me what air feels like. She could hear Emma's breath catch. Then what do? I need to talk to David. Really talk to him. This isn't fair to him, and it's not fair to you, and it's definitely not fair to me. Sarah wiped her eyes. Can you give me until after New Year's? Just a few days to figure out how to have the hardest conversation of my life? Yes, Emma said without hesitation. Take all the time you need. I'm here, Sarah. Whenever you're ready, I'm here. They stayed on the phone as midnight struck, listening to each other breathe, separated by miles, but connected in a way that terrified and exhilarated Sarah in equal measure. Sarah's journey is reaching a turning point. If you're invested in seeing how she finds the courage to live her truth, please subscribe to our channel. We're building a community that celebrates love in all its authentic forms, and we'd love to have you here with us. David returned from New York on January 2nd, exhausted but triumphant. The merger had gone through, which meant a significant bonus and likely a promotion. He talked about it over dinner, animated in a way Sarah rarely saw anymore, and she realized with a pang of sadness that they'd become roommates who occasionally ate together rather than partners who shared their lives. David, Sarah interrupted gently as he described some complex legal maneuver. We need to talk. He looked up from his pasta, something in her tone finally catching his attention. Is everything okay? Are you sick? No, nothing like that. Sarah set down her fork, her hands trembling. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to really listen. David's expression shifted from concern to something harder, more guarded. You're having an affair. No, Sarah said quickly. Not technically, but She took a deep breath. I've met someone, and I have feelings for them, and it's made me realize that I haven't been honest with you, or with myself. Who is he? David's voice was cold now. Someone from the hospital? It's not a he. Sarah forced herself to meet his eyes. David, I think I'm gay. Or bisexual. I'm not sure about the labels yet, but I know that I've been living a lie. That I married you, because it was what I was supposed to do, what my parents expected, what society expected. And that's not fair to either of us. David stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. This is a joke, right? Some kind of midlife crisis thing? You're stressed from work and... It's not a joke, Sarah said quietly. I wish it were that simple. But David, when's the last time we really talked? When's the last time we had sex? Or went on a date? Or did anything other than exist in parallel lives? We've been busy, building our careers, building a life together, but have we? Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Or have we been building separate lives that happen to share an address? When did you last ask me about my day and actually listen to the answer? When did I last care about your golf game or your cases? We're friends at best, David, distant friends. And you deserve more than that. We both do. David stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. So what? You're just going to throw away 8 years of marriage because you have a crush on some woman? That's not how adult relationships work, Sarah. There are commitments, vows. I know, Sarah said, standing too. And I'm not doing this lightly. I've spent weeks agonizing over this, trying to convince myself that I'm wrong, that I'm just confused, but I can't keep pretending. I can't spend the next 40 years living half a life, wondering what if. That's not fair to you either. Don't pretend this is for my benefit, David shot back, his face flushed with anger. You're being selfish. You're throwing away everything we've built because of some fantasy. Maybe I am being selfish, Sarah acknowledged. But David, look at me. Really look at me. Are you in love with me? Have you ever been? Or did you marry me because I fit the picture of what your wife should be? Successful, attractive, good at dinner parties? David opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken truths. I want a divorce, Sarah said softly. I'll move out. You can keep the house. And I'm not asking for anything except my personal things. I just need to be honest about who I am. Even if I'm still figuring that out. David sank back into his chair, suddenly looking much older than his 37 years. Who is she? Someone I barely know. Someone who helped me see that I was living for everyone else's expectations except my own. Sarah moved to stand beside him, not touching, but close. David, you're a good man. You deserve someone who loves you completely, not someone who's been playing a role, and I deserve the chance to figure out who I really am. I thought I knew you, David said, his voice breaking. How did I not know this about you? Because I didn't know it about myself, Sarah replied honestly. Or maybe I did, deep down. But I was too scared to look at it, too scared of disappointing people, of being different, of all the things that come with admitting you're not who everyone thinks you are. Sarah moved into a furnished apartment in Cambridge 3 days later. It was small, just a 1-bedroom with dated appliances and a view of the parking lot, but it was hers. For the first time in her adult life, she had a space that belonged only to her, decorated according to her tastes, organized in her way. She called Emma from the empty living room, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. I did it, Sarah said when Emma answered. I told David, I'm getting divorced. Sarah. Emma's voice was thick with emotion. Are you okay? I don't know, Sarah admitted. I'm terrified and relieved and guilty and free all at once. Is that normal? Completely normal, Emma assured her. Where are you? Sarah gave her the address. You don't have to come. I'm a mess right now. I'm already in my car, Emma interrupted gently. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Emma arrived, she brought takeout Thai food, a bottle of wine, and a small potted succulent. Every new home needs a plant, she explained, setting it on the kitchen counter. This one's hard to kill, which seemed appropriate given your schedule. They sat on the floor eating pad thai straight from the containers, and Sarah told her everything. The conversation with David, the painful process of packing her things, the strange mix of grief and liberation she felt. I keep waiting to feel like I made a mistake, Sarah confessed. But mostly I just feel tired, like I've been carrying something heavy for so long that I forgot it was there. And now that I've put it down, I don't know what to do with myself. You rest, Emma said simply. You give yourself time to heal and figure out who you are without all the expectations. And you don't have to have all the answers right now. What if I never figure it out? Sarah asked. What if I've blown up my entire life and I'm still just as confused? Then you'll be confused in a life that's authentically yours, Emma replied. Sarah, I need you to know something. What's happening between us? I want it. I want to explore it. But not if you're just rebounding from your marriage. Not if I'm just a way for you to prove something to yourself. Sarah looked at her. Really looked. At the way the overhead light caught the gold flecks in Emma's eyes. At the concerned furrow between her brows. At the gentle strength in the set of her shoulders. I don't know what you are to me yet, Sarah said honestly. But I know I want to find out, not because I'm trying to prove something, but because when I'm with you, I feel like myself, like the person I was supposed to be before I learned to be what everyone else needed. Emma set down her food and moved closer. Close enough that Sarah could smell her jasmine perfume, could see the way her pulse jumped in her throat. Can I kiss you? Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. Yes. Emma leaned in slowly, giving Sarah every opportunity to change her mind, to pull away. But Sarah didn't pull away. When their lips met, it was gentle, questioning. Nothing like the few kisses she'd shared with David. Those had been perfunctory, mechanical. Something you did because that's what couples did. This was different. This was awakening, recognition, coming home to a place she'd never been before, but had always been looking for. When they pulled apart, Sarah was crying again, but this time from relief rather than fear. Okay? Emma whispered. More than okay, Sarah replied, and kissed her again. The next few weeks were a study in contradictions. At the hospital, Sarah was Dr. Mitchell, composed, competent, focused entirely on her patients. But in her new apartment, with Emma, she was just Sarah, figuring out who that even meant. They took things slowly, mindfully. Emma would come over after work, and they'd cook dinner together, or more accurately, Emma would cook while Sarah chopped vegetables and asked questions about everything. They watched old movies, walked along the Charles River even in the bitter January cold, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Emma told her about growing up in Los Angeles, about coming out to her Mexican Catholic family, and the painful years that followed. "My mother wouldn't speak to me for almost a year," Emma shared one evening. "She thought I was choosing to sin, that I could just pray it away. It took time. But eventually she came around. Now she's one of my biggest advocates." Sarah talked about growing up in Connecticut, about the pressure to be perfect, to never cause problems, to always meet expectations. "I was the good daughter," she said. "The one who got straight A's, went to the right college, married the right kind of man. I never stopped to ask if it was what I wanted." "And now?" Emma asked, tucking a strand of Sarah's hair behind her ear. "Now I'm figuring out what I want," Sarah replied. "Starting with this." They kissed more, explored the physical aspects of their attraction, but always with Emma checking in, making sure Sarah was comfortable, never pushing for more than Sarah was ready to give. It was so different from what Sarah had known with David. There was communication, tenderness, a genuine desire to bring each other joy. But it wasn't all easy. Sarah's parents called weekly, demanding to know why she'd thrown away her marriage. Her mother cried. Her father lectured about commitment and duty. Sarah's colleagues at the hospital whispered, though no one said anything to her face. And late at night, Sarah sometimes woke up panicked, convinced she'd made a terrible mistake. During those moments, Emma would hold her, reminding her that confusion was part of the process, that she didn't have to have everything figured out immediately. "You're doing something incredibly brave," Emma would say. "Give yourself credit for that." Sarah's journey of self-discovery continues. If this story is resonating with you, if you see parts of yourself in her struggle to live authentically, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that matter. Spring arrived in Boston with the sudden intensity it always did. One day there was snow, the next day the trees were budding, and the Charles River was full of rowing teams. Sarah had been officially divorced for 2 months, and the paperwork, at least, was final. The emotional work of unraveling a marriage was more complicated. She'd started seeing a therapist, Dr. Chen, who specialized in sexuality and identity issues. In their sessions, Sarah was learning to distinguish between what she'd been taught to want and what she actually wanted. It was harder than she'd anticipated. "You spent 35 years building an identity," Dr. Chen observed during one session. "You can't expect to fully understand a new one in just a few months. Be patient with yourself." Sarah was trying. She'd come out to a few close friends, weathered their various reactions from support to confusion to, in one case, complete rejection. She told her parents, which resulted in her mother hanging up on her, and her father sending a long email about disappointment and family values. That one still stung. But she'd also discovered joy in unexpected places. She and Emma had settled into a relationship that felt natural, comfortable, while still maintaining their independence. Emma had her photography assignments, Sarah had her surgeries, and they came together in the evenings to share their days. It was late March when Emma got the assignment that would change everything. "National Geographic wants me to photograph a documentary project," Emma said, her eyes shining with excitement and terror. 6 months in South America, following indigenous communities and their healing practices. Sarah felt her stomach drop. 6 months? "I know. It's a long time." Emma took Sarah's hands, "And I know the timing is terrible. We've only been together for a few months, and you're still figuring things out. But Sarah, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. This is what I've been working toward my entire career." "When would you leave?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "End of April." "I'd be back in October," Sarah nodded, processing. They'd have just over a month together, and then Emma would be gone for 6 months. The rational part of her brain understood this was an incredible opportunity. The newly awakened, still vulnerable part of her wanted to beg Emma not to go. "You have to do it," Sarah said finally. "This is your dream." "I don't have to do anything," Emma countered. "If you asked me to stay, I would consider it." "No." Sarah shook her head firmly. "I won't be the person who holds you back from your dreams. I've spent too long not pursuing mine. I won't do that to you. Emma pulled her close, and Sarah buried her face in Emma's shoulder, breathing in her jasmine scent, trying to memorize everything about this moment. We'll make it work, Emma promised. Video calls, emails, messages, and I'll have some breaks where I can fly back for a few days. It won't be the same, Sarah said. No, Emma agreed. But it also doesn't have to be the end, unless you want it to be. I don't want it to be, Sarah said immediately. Then more quietly, I love you. I should have said that before, but I was scared. I'm still scared, but I love you. Emma's smile was radiant. I love you too. I have since that day in Dorchester, when I watched you paint that little blue bird and look so free. The next month passed too quickly. They spent every moment they could together. Weekends exploring Boston neighborhoods Sarah had never bothered to visit, evenings cooking elaborate meals and talking late into the night, early mornings watching the sun rise over the harbor. Sarah met Emma's friends, mostly other artists and photographers, and felt intimidated by their ease with themselves, their comfort in their identities. But they welcomed her warmly, and slowly, Sarah began to see glimpses of who she might become. Someone who could be both Dr. Mitchell the surgeon and Sarah the woman who loved another woman. The night before Emma was supposed to leave, they stayed up until dawn. Emma was mostly packed, her apartment a chaos of equipment and clothes. I'm going to miss you every single day, Emma said, her voice thick, but I'm also so excited for what this time will mean for you, for us. What do you mean? Sarah asked. You need time to figure out who you are outside of us, Emma explained. To build a life that's yours, not defined by your marriage or your career or even by our relationship. And I need to know that when I come back, if we continue this, it's because you've chosen me, not because I was convenient or because I represented freedom or rebellion. Sarah wanted to protest, to say that wasn't why she loved Emma. But part of her wondered if Emma was right. Had she truly chosen this life, or was she still reacting to the old one? 6 months, Sarah said. I can do 6 months. We can do 6 months, Emma corrected, kissing her softly. The months without Emma were harder than Sarah had anticipated. She threw herself into work, taking on extra surgeries, volunteering to mentor residents. She continued her therapy sessions with Dr. Chen, working through layers of internalized homophobia, family expectations, and the general trauma of deconstructing an identity she'd spent decades building. She also, for the first time in her life, made friends who were queer. She started attending a support group for late-in-life LGBTQ+ people, where she met others who were navigating similar journeys. There was Marcus, a 52-year-old accountant who'd come out as trans the year before. Jennifer, a 40-year-old mother of 3 who'd left her husband after falling in love with her best friend. Tom and Richard, a couple in their 60s who'd been together for 30 years, but had only felt safe coming out publicly in the last 5. Their stories helped Sarah understand that there was no one right way to be queer, no timeline for figuring yourself out, no age at which it became too late to live authentically. Emma called whenever she had internet access, which was sporadic. They'd video chat, and Sarah would see Emma's face lit by laptop screen in some remote location, hear the sounds of the jungle or mountains in the background. Emma would tell her about the communities she was documenting, the traditional healers she was photographing, the ways these ancient practices were being threatened by modernization. I miss you, Emma would always say, but I'm so proud of you. I can see the changes even through the screen. You look lighter, Sarah. Free. Sarah was changing. She cut her hair shorter, started wearing clothes she actually liked instead of what was appropriate for a doctor's wife. She painted her bedroom a deep teal instead of the safe beige David had preferred. Small changes, maybe, but each one felt like a declaration of independence. In August, her mother called. Sarah almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Your father and I would like you to come for dinner, her mother said stiffly. If you're willing. Sarah went, nervous and guarded. The dinner was awkward, stilted, full of long silences. But near the end, her mother reached across the table and took her hand. I don't understand this, she admitted. I may never fully understand. But you're my daughter, and I love you. I'm trying, Sarah. That's all I can promise, that I'll keep trying. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Sarah cried the whole drive back to Cambridge, but this time from relief and gratitude rather than grief. October arrived with brilliant fall colors. Emma was due back on the 15th, and Sarah was a mess of nerves and excitement. 6 months apart had given her clarity. She loved Emma, yes, but more importantly, she loved herself. She'd built a life that felt authentic, surrounded herself with people who accepted her completely, started to heal the wounds of decades of living for others. The question was, would Emma still want her? Would they still fit together after all this time apart? Sarah waited at Logan Airport, clutching a bouquet of sunflowers, Emma's favorites. The arrivals board showed the flight from Lima had landed, and Sarah's heart thundered as she watched passengers stream through the doors. And then, there she was, Emma, tanned and somehow even more beautiful than Sarah remembered, her dark hair longer and sun-streaked. She wore travel-worn jeans and a t-shirt from some place Sarah had never heard of, and she looked tired and wonderful and like home. Their eyes met across the crowded terminal. Emma's face broke into a radiant smile, and she started running. Sarah ran too, and they met in the middle, Emma dropping her camera bag to wrap her arms around Sarah. "You're here," Emma breathed against Sarah's neck. "You're really here." "I'm here," Sarah confirmed. "And Emma? I chose this. I chose you. Not because you're convenient or because you represent rebellion, but because I love you, because you saw me when I couldn't see myself, because you had the patience to let me figure out who I am." Emma pulled back just enough to look at her, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too. So much. And Sarah? You look incredible, like you've finally stepped into yourself." "I have," Sarah said. "It's been the hardest 6 months of my life, but also the most important. I know who I am now. I'm still figuring out all the details, but I know the core of it, and the core of it includes loving you." They kissed right there in the airport, with travelers rushing past them, with announcements echoing overhead, with all the chaos of Boston life swirling around them. And Sarah felt it again, that sense of coming home, of being exactly where she was supposed to be. "Come on," Sarah said, picking up Emma's camera bag. "Let me take you home." 6 months later, in April with Boston blooming around them, Sarah stood in Boston Common with Emma by her side. They'd come to see the spring flowers, but Sarah had an ulterior motive. "Emma," she started, her heart racing. "A year ago, I was a completely different person. I was living half a life, pretending to be someone I wasn't, going through motions I thought I was supposed to go through. And then I met you, and you asked me why I became a doctor, and somehow that question opened a door I'd been keeping locked my entire life." Emma's eyes were wide, attentive. "You didn't just help me figure out my sexuality," Sarah continued. "You helped me figure out how to live authentically, how to be brave, how to choose myself, and now I want to choose you, officially and forever." Sarah pulled a small box from her pocket and dropped to one knee. Around them, people stopped to watch, but Sarah only had eyes for Emma. "Emma Torres, will you marry me?" Emma was crying, nodding before Sarah even finished the question. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Sarah slipped the ring onto Emma's finger, a simple silver band with a small diamond, nothing like the elaborate ring David had given her. But this one was chosen with love and intention, rather than obligation. They stood, kissing again, and the people around them applauded. An elderly woman approached as the crowd dispersed. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "I've been with my wife for 40 years. You're going to have a beautiful life together." Sarah looked at Emma, at her joyful tears and radiant smile, and thought about everything that had led them to this moment, the accident that brought them together, the courage it took to admit the truth, the painful process of unraveling one life to build another. The months apart that proved their love could withstand distance. All of it had been necessary. All of it had brought her here. "We already do," Sarah replied, holding Emma close. "We already have a beautiful life." A year after that, Dr. Sarah Mitchell and Emma Torres were married in a small ceremony in the Boston Public Garden. Sarah's mother attended, sitting in the front row and crying through the entire ceremony. David sent a card wishing them well. He'd recently gotten engaged himself, to a woman from his firm who seemed to genuinely make him happy. Dr. Chen was there, as were Sarah's colleagues from the hospital, Emma's photographer friends, and all the people from their support group who'd become family. Sarah wore a simple white dress, Emma wore a cream pantsuit, and they exchanged vows they'd written themselves. "You taught me that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her tears. "That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. I love you, Emma. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. You taught me that love is worth waiting for," Emma replied. "That some connections transcend logic, transcend what we think we know about ourselves. I love you, Sarah. Thank you for choosing authenticity, for choosing growth, for choosing us." They kissed as wives for the first time, and Sarah felt it again. That sense of absolute rightness, of being exactly where she was supposed to be, with exactly who she was supposed to be with. Later, at the reception, as they danced to their first song, At Last, by Etta James, Emma whispered in Sarah's ear, "Remember when you asked me not to look at you like that?" Sarah laughed. "I was so scared. And now?" "Now, I want you to look at me exactly like that, for the rest of our lives." Emma pulled back just enough to meet Sarah's eyes, and in that gaze, Sarah saw everything. Love, promise, future, home. "Done," Emma said simply, and kissed her wife. 5 years later, Dr. Sarah Mitchell Torres sat in her office at Massachusetts General Hospital, reviewing surgical notes. On her desk was the photograph Emma had given her all those years ago. The two women in Boston Common, laughing together in the golden morning light. Next to it was a newer photo, Sarah and Emma at the beach, sun-kissed and happy, Emma's camera around her neck, Sarah's hand on Emma's pregnant belly. They were expecting their first child in 3 months, a daughter they'd already named Grace, after Sarah's grandmother who'd always told her to live with grace, but also with truth. Sarah's office door opened, and Emma walked in, her belly preceding her, looking beautiful and uncomfortable in equal measure. "Hey," Emma said, easing herself into the chair across from Sarah's desk. "I was in the neighborhood for a meeting with the Globe. Thought I'd see if you wanted to grab lunch." Sarah checked her watch. "I have surgery in an hour, but I can do a quick bite. How's our girl?" "Active," Emma replied, rubbing her stomach. "I think she's going to be a soccer player. Or a drummer, something that involves a lot of kicking." As they walked through the hospital toward the cafeteria, Sarah marveled at how much had changed since that November night when Emma had first been wheeled through these doors, how terrified she'd been of that connection, how close she'd come to walking away from the most important relationship of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, reading her expression the way she always could. "About how grateful I am," Sarah replied. "For that car accident, for your courage, for my courage eventually, for all of it." Emma stopped walking, taking Sarah's hand. Right there in the middle of the busy hospital corridor, with doctors and nurses and patients flowing around them, Emma said, "Look at me." Sarah met her eyes, those honey brown eyes that had first seen through all her careful walls. "I love you," Emma said. "Our life, our baby, all of it. We built something beautiful, Sarah." "We did," Sarah agreed. "Because you wouldn't let me look away. You insisted I see the truth. We both did that," Emma corrected. "I just asked the question. You had the courage to answer it." As they continued toward the cafeteria, Sarah thought about all the people who were somewhere in their own journeys, afraid, confused, living lives that didn't fit anymore. She thought about younger versions of herself, wondering if they'd ever find the courage to be authentic, and she hoped they would. Because on the other side of fear, on the other side of letting go of who you thought you were supposed to be, there was life. Real, authentic, beautiful life. There was love that saw you completely. There was freedom in truth. There was coming home to yourself. And it was worth every moment of fear, every difficult conversation, every painful step toward becoming whole. Thank you for joining us on Sarah and Emma's journey. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that it's never too late to live authentically, please subscribe to our channel. We share stories of love that celebrates truth, courage, and the beautiful complexity of the human heart. Your support allows us to continue creating content that matters. Until next time, remember, your truth is worth living, and love is always worth the risk. The soft piano melody plays once more as the story comes to a close, leaving listeners with a sense of hope, possibility, and the enduring power of authentic love.